Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one in her family. At 23, she worked as a children's librarian in downtown Phoenix, spending her days reading stories to kindergartners and helping teenagers find books for school projects. With her soft brown eyes, gentle smile, and habit of wearing cardigans even in the desert heat, most people saw her as nothing more than a sweet, bookish young woman who probably went home to feed cats and watch cooking shows. They had no idea that Sarah spent her evenings studying explosive ordnance disposal manuals. It had started 3 years earlier when her older brother Marcus returned from his third deployment in Afghanistan. He came back different, quieter, more serious, with shadows in his eyes that hadn't been there before. During family dinners, he would sometimes stop mid-sentence, his fork halfway to his mouth, staring at nothing while their mother asked if he was okay. One night, Sarah found him in the garage at 2 a.m, sitting on an overturned crate with his head in his hands. She had come out to get her bike for an early morning ride, but stopped when she heard the sound of quiet sobbing. "Marcus," she whispered, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, wiping his eyes quickly. "Sorry, Sarah. Didn't mean to wake anyone." She sat down on another crate beside him. "You didn't. I was just getting my bike. Bad dream again?" Marcus nodded, then, after a long pause, he started talking. He told her about his job in Afghanistan, how he had been part of an explosive ordnance disposal unit, defusing bombs and improvised explosive devices that could kill dozens of innocent people. He described the weight of responsibility, knowing that one wrong move could end not just his life, but the lives of his teammates and countless civilians. "The worst part," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "was seeing what happened when we didn't get there in time. Families destroyed. Children hurt. And, knowing that maybe, if I had been faster or smarter or braver, I could have prevented it." Sarah listened without interrupting, her heart breaking for her brother. When he finished, she put her hand on his shoulder. "You saved people, Marcus. You saved so many people." "Not enough," he replied. "Never enough." That conversation changed everything for Sarah. She began researching explosive ordnance disposal, initially just trying to understand what her brother had gone through. She read about the different types of bombs, the techniques used to defuse them, the psychology of bomb makers. What started as an attempt to help her brother process his experiences became a genuine fascination with the field. Sarah discovered that she had a natural aptitude for understanding complex mechanical systems. The precise, methodical nature of bomb disposal appealed to the same part of her mind that enjoyed cataloging books and solving puzzles. She began taking online courses in electronics and mechanical engineering, studying in secret after her library shifts. Marcus eventually noticed the technical manuals hidden between romance novels on her bookshelf. "Sarah, what are you doing?" he asked one evening, holding up a thick textbook on explosive devices. "Learning," she said simply. "I want to understand what you went through. And, maybe I can help people too." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, he said, "It's dangerous work, Sarah. It's not like the movies. One mistake and—" "I know," she interrupted. "But, someone has to do it, right? And, you taught me that the most important thing is saving lives." Over the next 2 years, Marcus helped train her. He taught her to read blast patterns, to identify different types of explosive materials, to think like a bomb maker in order to anticipate their methods. They practiced in the garage using harmless mock-ups that Marcus built, teaching her to work with steady hands even when her heart was racing. Sarah never told anyone else about her training. Her parents thought she was just spending more time with Marcus, helping him readjust to civilian life. Her co-workers at the library saw her as the same gentle, quiet woman who organized storytime and helped with homework. Even her closest friends had no idea that she could identify the components of a pipe bomb or explain the difference between a pressure plate trigger and a timer mechanism. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Sarah arrived at the Phoenix Public Library's Central Branch at 8 a.m., an hour before opening time. She liked to use the quiet hour to prepare for the day, setting up the children's reading corner, checking which books needed to be reshelved, and reviewing the schedule for school groups. The library was a beautiful building, built in the 1990s with soaring glass windows and open spaces designed to feel welcoming and bright. It served as a community hub for the surrounding neighborhood, hosting everything from toddler story times to senior citizen computer classes to teenage study groups. On any given day, hundreds of people passed through its doors: families, students, job seekers using the computers, homeless individuals seeking air conditioning and a safe place to rest. Sarah was arranging picture books when she heard the first unusual sound. It was a mechanical humming, very faint, coming from somewhere near the main circulation desk. She paused, listening carefully. The library had its normal sounds: the hum of air conditioning, the distant traffic outside, the occasional creak of settling wood. But this was different. More rhythmic. More deliberate. She walked toward the front desk, following the sound. It seemed to be coming from underneath the main information counter, where the library's computer servers were housed in a locked cabinet. Sarah knelt down, pressing her ear closer to the cabinet door. The humming was definitely mechanical, with a subtle clicking undertone. Every few seconds, she heard a soft electronic beep. Her training with Marcus kicked in immediately, and ice-cold fear flooded her system. Those sounds were characteristic of a timing device. Sarah's first instinct was to run. Every self-preservation instinct screamed at her to get out of the building immediately and call the police. But then, she thought about what would happen when the library opened in 45 minutes. Mrs. Chen would arrive with her twin toddlers for story time. The Riverside Elementary third-grade class was scheduled for a field trip at 10 a.m. The teenage study group would claim their usual tables by the windows. If there really was a bomb in the building, and if it was set to go off during regular hours, dozens of innocent people could die. Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly and think clearly. She needed to verify what she was hearing before calling in a bomb threat that might be false. Evacuating the library and calling the bomb squad would be the right thing to do if she was correct, but it would also shut down an important community resource for days and create panic if she was wrong. She tried the cabinet door. It was locked, but Sarah had keys to most areas of the library. She found the right key on her ring and carefully opened the cabinet. Inside, among the usual tangle of computer cables and networking equipment, was something that definitely didn't belong. A small black box, about the size of a smartphone, was attached to the main power line feeding the library's electrical system. Red and green LED lights blinked in sequence, and a small digital display showed numbers counting down. 12:47:33. 12:47:32. 12:47:31. Sarah stared at the display, her mouth dry. 12 hours, 47 minutes, and counting down. That would put the detonation time at around 9:30 p.m., well after closing time, when the library would normally be empty. But tonight was different. Tonight was the monthly community board meeting, scheduled to run until 10 p.m. The meeting regularly drew 40 to 50 local residents, including families with children. Someone had planned this very carefully. Sarah's hands shook as she took out her phone to call 911, but then she hesitated. Phoenix was a big city, but it only had one full-time bomb disposal unit. If they were busy with another call, or if there was traffic, or if the evacuation took longer than expected. She looked at the timer again. The numbers seemed to be moving faster now. 12:46:15. 12:46:14. 12:46:13. She thought about Marcus, about all the hours they had spent in the garage learning about explosive devices. He had always emphasized that the most important rule was to preserve life, even if it meant taking personal risks. Sometimes, he had told her, you're the only thing standing between innocent people and disaster. When that happens, you do whatever it takes. Sarah made her decision. She would call 911, but she would also try to defuse the device herself if the bomb squad couldn't arrive in time. It went against every protocol she had learned, but the alternative, letting dozens of people die, was unacceptable. She called 911 first. 911, what's your emergency? This is Sarah Martinez at the Phoenix Public Library downtown branch. I've found what appears to be an explosive device in the building. We need the bomb squad immediately. There was a pause. Ma'am, did you say an explosive device? Yes. It's attached to the electrical system and has a timer counting down. I can see approximately 12 hours and 45 minutes remaining. Okay, ma'am. I need you to evacuate the building immediately and move to a safe distance. Do not touch the device. Officers and the bomb squad are being dispatched. Understood, Sarah said, but she didn't hang up. Can you tell me the estimated arrival time for the bomb squad? I don't have that information yet, ma'am. Please evacuate immediately. Sarah ended the call and looked at the timer again. 12 hours 44 minutes and 51 seconds. She tried calling the library's main office to report that the building needed to be closed for the day, but it was still too early and no one answered. She was alone with the bomb. Sarah knelt in front of the device, using her phone's flashlight to examine it more closely. The black box was professionally made, not the crude pipe bomb or pressure cooker device that amateur terrorists often used. The LED display was clear and well designed. Multiple wires ran from the box to what appeared to be blocks of plastic explosive attached to the building's main electrical panel. This was the work of someone with serious technical knowledge. Sarah photographed the device from multiple angles, then began tracing the wire connections. She could see the basic components: a timer mechanism, a detonator, and approximately 2 pounds of what looked like C4 plastic explosive. Enough to destroy the electrical system and start a fire that could engulf the entire building. The timer appeared to be the weak point. If she could disconnect it from the detonator without triggering a backup mechanism, the explosive would become harmless. But if the bomb maker had installed anti-tampering devices? Sarah heard footsteps outside and realized that other library staff would be arriving soon. She couldn't let them into the building, but she also couldn't leave the bomb unattended. She quickly locked the front doors from the inside and put up a handwritten sign: "Library closed today due to emergency. Sorry for inconvenience." Her phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor: "Sarah, why is the library closed? Are you okay?" She texted back: "Emergency situation. Building evacuated. We'll call soon to explain." Then, she returned to the bomb. Working slowly and methodically, Sarah began tracing each wire to understand the device's logic. The timer was connected to the detonator through a relay system. When the countdown reached 0, it would complete a circuit and trigger the explosive. But there were also 2 additional wires that seemed to serve as backup triggers. One wire was connected to a motion sensor. If someone moved the black box after arming it, the bomb would explode immediately. The other wire was connected to a light sensor. If someone tried to cut the main power to the building, the sudden darkness would trigger the detonation. The bomb maker had thought of everything. Sarah sat back on her heels, thinking. She needed to disable all 3 trigger mechanisms simultaneously, or the bomb would explode. It was like a 3-dimensional puzzle where every piece had to be moved in perfect coordination. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing louder. The police were arriving, which meant she would soon have help. But it also meant she was running out of time to examine the device before professionals took over. Once the bomb squad arrived, they would establish a perimeter and evacuate everyone, including her. They would handle the situation by the book, which was the safe and responsible approach. But Sarah had noticed something that worried her. The timer wasn't just counting down to the scheduled detonation. It was also monitoring the building's normal operating schedule. If the device detected unusual activity, like a bomb squad evacuation, it might trigger early to prevent defusal. She needed to act fast. Sarah opened her backpack and pulled out a small toolkit that she had started carrying after her training with Marcus. It contained wire strippers, electrical tape, a digital multimeter, and several small screwdrivers. Nothing fancy, but enough to work with basic electronics. The pounding on the front door told her that the police had arrived. She ignored it, focusing on the bomb. She had perhaps 10 minutes before they found another way into the building. Working by feel as much as sight, Sarah began the delicate process of tracing each wire to its connection point. The motion sensor was the easiest to locate, a small device attached to the underside of the black box. She couldn't remove it without triggering the bomb, but she could potentially bypass it. The light sensor was trickier. It was integrated into the timer mechanism itself, making it nearly impossible to disable without affecting the main countdown. But Sarah remembered something Marcus had taught her about light sensors: they could often be fooled by providing a constant, steady light source. Using her phone's flashlight, she positioned it so that the light sensor would continue to detect illumination even if the building's power was cut. It was a temporary solution, but it might buy her some time. The motion sensor was more challenging. Any movement of the device would trigger immediate detonation. But Sarah realized that the sensor might be calibrated to detect large movements, not tiny vibrations. If she worked very slowly and carefully, she could hear voices outside, including someone with a megaphone announcing that the building was surrounded. The bomb squad was probably setting up their equipment. Soon they would find a way inside and order her to evacuate. Sarah made her choice. She picked up her smallest screwdriver and began working on the motion sensor's housing. If she could access the device's calibration settings, she might be able to adjust its sensitivity or disable it entirely. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. This was what Marcus had trained her for, even if neither of them had ever imagined she would use these skills in her own workplace. As she worked, Sarah thought about all the people who depended on the library, the children who came for story time, the students who used the computers, the elderly residents who attended the community meetings. She was their only protection right now. And she wasn't going to let them down. The screws on the motion sensor were tiny, designed to prevent tampering. But Sarah's small hands and precise movements allowed her to work in the cramped space beneath the electrical panel. One screw came loose, then another. Outside, she could hear more vehicles arriving. The bomb squad was setting up their equipment, establishing perimeters, following protocols designed to keep everyone safe. They were professionals who knew their job, and, under normal circumstances, she would trust them completely. But these weren't normal circumstances. This bomb was designed to explode if it detected a standard bomb squad response. The only way to defuse it was to work carefully and quietly, without triggering any of the multiple backup systems. Sarah was the only person in position to do that. With the motion sensor's housing finally open, she could see the device's internal components. It was more sophisticated than she had expected, with multiple circuit boards and a backup battery system. But the basic principle was simple: it detected movement and sent a signal to the detonator when triggered. Sarah found the wire that carried the trigger signal and carefully stripped away a small section of insulation. Using her multimeter, she confirmed that this was the correct wire. Now she needed to create a bypass circuit that would prevent the trigger signal from reaching the detonator, even if the motion sensor was activated. It was delicate work, requiring her to make connections to wires that were barely thicker than human hair. One mistake, one slip of the screwdriver or wrong connection, and the bomb would explode instantly. But Sarah's hands remained steady. She had found her calling in the most unexpected place, using skills she never thought she would need to save lives she might never know about. As she worked to defuse the bomb that threatened her community, Sarah Martinez was no longer the quiet librarian who read stories to children. She was a guardian, standing between innocent people and disaster, doing whatever it took to keep them safe. The bypass circuit Sarah created was holding, but she could hear the bomb squad setting up their equipment outside. Heavy footsteps echoed around the building as they established a secure perimeter. She knew they would find a way inside soon, and, when they did, they would order her to evacuate immediately. But Sarah had discovered something troubling while examining the device more closely. Hidden beneath the main timer was a second countdown mechanism, much smaller and harder to detect. This backup timer was set to activate if the primary system detected any interruption or tampering. Once triggered, it would give the bomb squad only 7 minutes to complete their evacuation before detonation. The bomber had designed this device specifically to kill first responders. Sarah's phone vibrated with another text from her supervisor, but she ignored it. She was now working on the most dangerous part of the defusal process, disabling the light sensor without triggering the backup timer. The sensor was integrated into the main circuit board, requiring her to work with components smaller than rice grains. Through the library's large windows, she could see police officers directing traffic away from the building. News vans were already arriving, their satellite dishes extending like mechanical flowers reaching toward the sky. Word was spreading quickly through the community about the bomb threat at the beloved local library. Sarah thought about Mrs. Chen, who would probably arrive soon with her twin toddlers, expecting story time to begin at 9 a.m. as usual. She thought about the Riverside Elementary students who were looking forward to their field trip, and the teenagers who depended on the library's computers for their homework. All of those people were safe now because the building had been evacuated, but they would lose something important if the library was destroyed. More than that, if the bomb exploded and killed members of the bomb squad, it would send a message to every terrorist that public spaces were vulnerable. Other bombers would copy this design, targeting schools and hospitals and community centers. Sarah was fighting to stop not just this attack, but all the ones that might follow. Working by touch as much as sight, Sarah located the light sensor's power supply wire. It was a hair-thin strand of copper, barely visible even with her phone's flashlight. She needed to cut this wire without disturbing any of the surrounding circuits, while simultaneously maintaining the steady light source that was preventing premature detonation. The sound of breaking glass told her that the bomb squad had found their way into the building. She could hear boots moving carefully across the main floor, along with the quiet electronic beeping of detection equipment. They would reach her location in less than 2 minutes. Sarah made a critical decision. Instead of trying to explain the device's complexity to the bomb squad, which could take precious time and might trigger the backup systems if they followed standard protocols, she would continue working to defuse it herself. She was already past the point of no return anyway. Moving away from the bomb now would trigger the motion sensor, and trying to brief the bomb squad on the device's anti-tampering mechanisms would waste time they didn't have. She carefully positioned her wire strippers around the light sensor's power wire. The margin for error was essentially zero. If she cut too much insulation or nicked the wire itself, the sensor would interpret it as a power failure and trigger immediate detonation. Phoenix PD. Is anyone in the building? The voice came from the main entrance, professional and commanding. Sarah knew she should respond, but she was in the middle of the most delicate part of the procedure. Even speaking loudly might vibrate the device enough to trigger the motion sensor. Instead, she focused on making the cut. Her hands moved with surgical precision, stripping away just enough insulation to expose the copper wire without damaging it. Then, she used a tiny piece of electrical tape to bypass the sensor entirely, creating a circuit that would maintain power flow even if the original sensor failed. "We have movement in the basement area," someone called out. Possible survivor taking shelter. Sarah heard footsteps heading toward the staircase that led down to the lower level where she was working. She had perhaps 60 seconds before they found her. Enough time to disable one more component if she worked quickly. The backup timer was the most dangerous remaining element. Unlike the main countdown, which was designed to give the bomber time to escape, the backup was meant to kill anyone who tried to interfere with the device. Sarah could see its digital display counting down from 6:43, 6:42, 6:41. But she had noticed something that the bomber probably hadn't intended. The backup timer was connected to the main device through a single data cable that carried synchronization signals between the two systems. If she could interrupt that connection without triggering either timer's anti-tampering mechanisms, both devices would lose coordination and shut down safely. It was an incredibly risky strategy. Most bomb disposal protocols emphasized working on one component at a time to minimize the chance of accidental detonation. But this bomb was designed to defeat standard protocols. The only way to stop it was to think like the bomber and find the flaws in his design. Sarah located the data cable, a thin ribbon of wires that connected the backup timer to the main circuit board. Unlike the other components, this cable didn't appear to have any anti-tampering protection. The bomber had probably assumed that no one would be able to access it without first triggering the motion or light sensors. Ma'am, this is Sergeant Rodriguez with Phoenix PD Bomb Squad. I need you to respond if you can hear me. The voice was closer now, maybe 20 feet away. Sarah could hear the distinctive electronic humming of bomb detection equipment. The sergeant was following proper procedure, using his instruments to scan for explosive devices before approaching too closely. Sarah knew she had to work faster. The bomb squad's detection equipment might interfere with the device's electronics, potentially triggering systems that were designed to prevent exactly this kind of intervention. Every second the professionals got closer increased the risk of accidental detonation. She positioned her wire strippers around the data cable and took a deep breath. This was it. If her theory was wrong about how the timers communicated with each other, cutting this cable would immediately explode the device. But, if she was right, severing the connection would cause both timers to enter a safe mode where they couldn't trigger the detonator. Ma'am, I'm Officer Sarah Chen. I can see you working near some kind of electronic device. I need you to stop what you're doing and move away slowly. Sarah looked up to see a young woman in full bomb disposal gear approaching carefully, her movements deliberate and professional. Officer Chen was probably in her early 30s, with intelligent dark eyes visible through her protective visor. She carried detection equipment that was much more sophisticated than Sarah's simple multimeter. I can't stop, Sarah said quietly. If I move away from the device now, the motion sensor will trigger immediate detonation. And if you come any closer with that equipment, the electromagnetic interference might set off the backup timer. Officer Chen stopped immediately. Her training had taught her to listen carefully to anyone found near a suspected explosive device. Sometimes civilians notice things that professional equipment missed, especially when bombers used unconventional designs. Okay, Chen said calmly. Can you tell me what you've observed about the device? Sarah quickly explained what she had discovered: the dual timer system, the anti-tampering mechanisms, and the data cable that connected everything together. As she spoke, she continued working on the wire strippers, positioning them precisely around the cable that she believed was the key to disabling the bomb safely. Officer Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally speaking into her radio to update the incident commander. Sarah could hear voices outside as more bomb squad personnel arrived, along with fire departments and emergency medical teams. The response was massive and professional, exactly what a situation like this required. Ma'am, Officer Chen said finally, what you're describing is consistent with an advanced anti-tampering device. Our standard protocols would likely trigger the backup systems you've identified. But, I need to ask, do you have training in explosive ordnance disposal? Sarah hesitated. She could lie and say she was a professional, which might give her credibility but could also result in criminal charges later if anyone was hurt. Or she could tell the truth and risk being ordered to evacuate immediately. My brother is former military EOD, she said finally. He taught me the basics. I know this isn't standard protocol, but I think I can disable the device if you give me 2 more minutes. Officer Chen was quiet for a moment, probably weighing her options. Protocol said to evacuate all civilians and handle the bomb using established procedures. But protocol also said to preserve life above all else, and if Sarah was right about the anti-tampering mechanisms, following standard procedures might get everyone killed. What's your name? Chen asked. Sarah Martinez. I work here, I'm a librarian. Sarah, I'm going to trust your judgment, but I need you to talk me through exactly what you're planning to do. And, if anything goes wrong, I want you to drop flat and cover your head. Understood? Sarah nodded, grateful that the officer was listening to her concerns instead of simply ordering her to evacuate. I'm going to cut this data cable that connects the 2 timer systems. My theory is that without synchronization between the main and backup timers, the device will enter a fail-safe mode and shut down safely. And if your theory is wrong? Sarah looked at the countdown displays. The main timer showed 12 hours 38 minutes and 15 seconds, while the backup timer had reached 5:47. If I'm wrong, we'll all know in about half a second. Officer Chen spoke into her radio, requesting that all personnel move back to maximum safe distance. Then, she took a position behind a concrete support pillar where she could still observe Sarah's work while having some protection if the device exploded. Okay, Sarah. You have my permission to proceed. But, take your time and don't let me pressure you. Better to work carefully than quickly. Sarah appreciated the vote of confidence, but she knew she couldn't take too much time. The backup timer was approaching the 5-minute mark, and she could hear more emergency vehicles arriving outside. If word of her amateur defusal attempt reached the incident commander, he might order everyone to evacuate regardless of the consequences. She made the cut. The data cable separated cleanly, its thin wires sparking once before going dark. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Both timer displays continued counting down, and Sarah wondered if she had just killed herself and Officer Chen by severing the wrong connection. Then, simultaneously, both displays flickered and went blank. The electronic humming that had been present since Sarah first discovered the device faded to silence. The LED lights that had been blinking in sequence went dark. Even the subtle vibration she had felt through the floor when the device was active disappeared completely. Status? Officer Chen called out, not moving from her position behind the pillar. Sarah used her multimeter to check the circuits leading to the detonator. No power flow. No signal activity. The device was completely inert. I think it's safe, she said, but her voice shook with exhaustion and residual fear. Officer Chen approached carefully, using her detection equipment to scan the device from multiple angles. After several minutes of thorough examination, she spoke into her radio. Device appears to be neutralized. Requesting EOD team leader for final verification. Within minutes, the basement area was filled with bomb squad personnel conducting detailed analysis of the disabled device. Sarah was gently but firmly escorted upstairs and outside, where paramedics checked her for signs of shock or injury. She was physically unharmed, but the adrenaline crash left her feeling weak and disoriented. The incident commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, was a serious man in his 50s with silver hair and intelligent gray eyes. He had spent 25 years in military explosive ordnance disposal before joining the Phoenix Police Department, and Sarah could tell he was not entirely pleased that a civilian had defused the bomb instead of waiting for his team. Ms. Martinez, he said, sitting down beside her on the ambulance tailgate where the paramedics had placed her. Officer Chen tells me you have some training in EOD procedures. Can you explain how you knew to cut that data cable? Sarah told him about her brother's service in Afghanistan and the informal training she had received. She explained her reasoning about the device's anti-tampering mechanisms and why she believed standard protocols would have triggered early detonation. Lieutenant Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. You took an enormous risk, he said finally. If you had been wrong about any aspect of that device, you would have been killed instantly, and probably Officer Chen as well. I know, Sarah replied. But if I had done nothing, the bomb would have exploded tonight during the community meeting. 40 or 50 people would have died, including children. Morrison nodded slowly. Your analysis of the device was correct. Our preliminary examination confirms that it was designed specifically to defeat standard bomb disposal protocols. Following our normal procedures would have resulted in detonation within 7 minutes of our arrival. He paused, looking at the library building where crime scene technicians were now processing evidence. The device was sophisticated enough that we probably would have needed to call in federal EOD specialists from Tucson or Las Vegas. That would have taken hours. By then. He didn't need to finish the sentence. By then, the community meeting would have begun, and dozens of innocent people would have been in the building when the timer reached 0. Ms. Martinez, Morrison continued, what you did today was technically illegal. Civilians are not permitted to handle explosive devices under any circumstances. But it was also the right thing to do, and it saved lives. I'm going to recommend that no charges be filed, and I'm also going to suggest that you consider a career change. Sarah looked up at him, confused. A career change? Morrison smiled for the first time since she had met him. Phoenix PD is always looking for qualified EOD technicians. Your brother's training gave you a good foundation, but you have natural instincts that can't be taught. With proper certification and equipment, you could do this kind of work professionally. The idea had never occurred to Sarah. She loved being a librarian, loved working with children and helping people find information. But she had also discovered something about herself today. When innocent lives were at stake, she was willing to risk everything to protect them. Before she could respond, her phone rang. It was Marcus, her brother, his voice tight with worry. "Sarah, I just heard on the news that there was a bomb at your library. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Marcus. Actually, I'm better than fine. I think I found my calling." As she told her brother what had happened, Sarah looked back at the library building where she had spent 3 quiet years organizing books and reading stories to children. It looked the same from the outside, but she knew everything had changed. She was no longer just Sarah Martinez, the gentle librarian who wore cardigans and fed stray cats. She was someone who could stand steady-handed in the face of danger, someone who could make life or death decisions under pressure, someone who could save people when it mattered most. The bomb had been defused, but Sarah's real story was just beginning. The investigation into who planted the bomb at the Phoenix Public Library consumed the next several weeks. Sarah found herself at the center of a complex federal investigation involving the FBI, ATF, and local law enforcement. The device had been too sophisticated for a random act of terrorism. Someone with serious technical knowledge and access to military-grade materials had specifically targeted the library. While investigators worked to identify the bomber, Sarah struggled with the sudden attention her actions had brought. Local news stations wanted interviews. The mayor's office called to schedule a commendation ceremony. Phoenix Police Department offered her a position in their bomb squad, pending completion of formal training. Most overwhelming of all, people throughout the city now looked at her differently. She was no longer invisible. Sarah Martinez, the librarian who saved lives by defusing a bomb with her bare hands, that's how Channel 12 News introduced her when she reluctantly agreed to a single television interview. The reporter, a polished woman in her 40s named Janet Stevens, seemed determined to turn Sarah into a hometown hero. "Tell us, Sarah, what was going through your mind when you first discovered the explosive device?" Sarah sat uncomfortably in the library's main reading area, which had reopened after a thorough security sweep. She had chosen this location for the interview because she wanted people to remember that the library was safe again, ready to serve the community as it always had. "Honestly, my first thought was about all the people who use this space every day," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "The children who come for story time, the students who depend on our computers, the families who attend our evening programs. I couldn't let anything happen to them." "But you had no formal bomb disposal training. Weren't you afraid?" Sarah considered the question. She had been afraid, terrified actually, but fear hadn't been the dominant emotion. "I was focused on solving the problem. My brother taught me that fear can be useful if it makes you careful, but it becomes dangerous if it prevents you from acting when action is necessary." The interview aired that evening, and, by the next morning, Sarah's phone was ringing constantly. News outlets from across the country wanted to talk to the librarian hero. Publishers called offering book deals. A Hollywood agent left 3 voicemails about movie rights. Sarah ignored most of the attention, but she couldn't ignore the letter that arrived from FBI Special Agent Maria Vasquez. "Ms. Martinez," the letter read, "I would like to meet with you regarding the ongoing investigation into the library bombing incident. We have made significant progress in identifying the perpetrator, and we believe you may be in danger. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting in a secure location." Sarah called the number that evening after the library closed. Agent Vasquez answered on the first ring, her voice professional but concerned. "Ms. Martinez, thank you for calling. I apologize for the formal letter, but we needed to be certain this communication reached you directly. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.? I'll send you an address." "Is this about the person who planted the bomb?" "Yes, and about your safety. We've identified the bomber, and, frankly, we're worried about retaliation." This individual has a history of targeting people who interfere with his operations. The meeting took place in a nondescript office building downtown, in a conference room with no windows and multiple security cameras. Agent Vasquez was a compact woman with sharp intelligence in her dark eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like she had seen too much violence in her career but had never become hardened to it. "Ms. Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is classified, but you need to understand the situation for your own protection." Vasquez opened a thick file folder and spread photographs across the conference table. "The man who planted the bomb at your library is Thomas Barrett, a former Army explosive ordnance disposal specialist who was dishonorably discharged 3 years ago for insubordination and suspected theft of military equipment." Sarah studied the photographs. Barrett was in his early 40s, with thinning brown hair and cold blue eyes. He looked ordinary, the kind of person who would blend into any crowd. But there was something unsettling about his expression, a barely contained anger that made Sarah uncomfortable even looking at his picture. "Barrett has been linked to at least 4 other bombing incidents in the past 2 years, Vasquez continued. "He targets public spaces, schools, hospitals, community centers, with devices designed to kill first responders as well as civilians. He sees himself as fighting a war against what he calls soft targets that make society vulnerable." "But why the library specifically?" "We think it was partially random. He was looking for a location with regular community events and minimal security. But we also found evidence that he had been watching the building for several weeks before planting the device. He knew about the monthly community meetings, knew when the building would be most crowded." Vasquez pulled out another photograph, this one showing a makeshift workshop in what appeared to be a garage or basement. Workbenches were covered with electronic components, timer mechanisms, and what looked like military-grade explosive materials. "We raided Barrett's apartment 2 days ago, but he had already fled. However, we found his workshop and his planning materials. Ms. Martinez, this man had detailed information about your daily routine, your work schedule, even your home address. He was planning to target you personally for interfering with his attack." Sarah felt ice-cold fear settle in her stomach. "He was watching me?" "For weeks, apparently. He had photographs of you arriving at work, leaving the library, going to the grocery store. He even knew about your brother's military background and your informal training in explosive ordnance disposal." The agent pulled out a handwritten notebook filled with Barrett's cramped writing. He wrote extensively about what he calls civilian interference in his operations. He believes that untrained people who attempt to defuse his devices are insulting his professional expertise. In his mind, you didn't just save lives, you humiliated him. Sarah stared at the notebook, trying to process the implications. "So he's going to try again?" "We believe he's planning another attack, and this time it will be designed specifically to draw you in and kill you along with as many other people as possible. Barrett's psychology profile suggests he's become obsessed with proving that his devices cannot be defeated by amateur intervention." Agent Vasquez closed the file folder and leaned forward. "Ms. Martinez, I'm going to be direct with you. Barrett is extremely dangerous, and he has access to sophisticated explosive materials and equipment. We've placed you in our witness protection program temporarily, but that's only a short-term solution. What are my options? You can relocate permanently to another state under a new identity, and we'll provide ongoing security support. Or..." Vasquez paused, studying Sarah's face carefully. "Or you can help us catch him." Sarah had expected the first option, but the second surprised her. "Help how?" "Barrett is obsessed with proving that he can build a device you can't defuse. Our behavioral analysts believe he'll try to contact you directly, either to taunt you or to challenge you to another confrontation. If he does, we can trace the communication and hopefully locate him before he strikes again." "You want to use me as bait?" "In a controlled situation with extensive protection, yes. Barrett has already killed 16 people in his previous attacks. If we don't stop him soon, that number will grow significantly." Sarah thought about the children who came to the library for story time, about Mrs. Chun and her twin toddlers, about all the innocent people who might become Barrett's next targets if he wasn't caught. Then, she thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if the quiet man at the grocery store or the jogger in the park might be a bomber planning her death. What exactly would I have to do? Agent Vasquez smiled grimly. We want you to go back to your normal routine, but with extensive surveillance protection. We'll monitor all your communications and track anyone who shows unusual interest in your activities. If Barrett makes contact, we'll be ready to respond immediately. And if he doesn't make contact? If he just plants another bomb somewhere? Then, we hope our other investigative leads will locate him before he strikes. But, frankly, Ms. Martinez, you may be our best chance of stopping him quickly. Sarah was quiet for a long time, weighing her options. The safe choice was to disappear into witness protection, to trade her identity and her life in Phoenix for security in some distant city where no one knew her name. She could find work in another library, help different children with their homework, live quietly and safely. But Barrett would still be free, still planning attacks on other libraries and schools and community centers. Other people would face the same choice she had faced in the basement of her library, risk their lives to save strangers, or let innocent people die. I'll do it, she said finally. I'll help you catch him. Over the following weeks, Sarah returned to her normal routine at the Phoenix Public Library, but nothing felt normal anymore. FBI agents disguised as maintenance workers, substitute teachers, and regular patrons monitored every area of the building. Her apartment was under constant surveillance. Even her morning jogs were followed by agents in unmarked vehicles. The psychological pressure was immense. Every unexpected sound, every unfamiliar face, every phone call from an unknown number could potentially be Barrett making his move. Sarah found it difficult to sleep, and, when she did, she often woke from nightmares about explosive devices hidden in children's books or timer mechanisms concealed in computer terminals. But she also discovered that her experience with the bomb had changed her in profound ways. She was more confident now, more decisive. When problems arose at the library, budget disputes, difficult patrons, technical failures, she approached them with the same calm analytical thinking she had used to defuse the explosive device. Her colleagues noticed the difference. Sarah, you seem different since the bombing incident, said Jennifer Walsh, the head librarian, during their weekly staff meeting. More authoritative, I guess. In a good way. Sarah smiled. I learned that I can handle pressure better than I thought. It's changed how I approach everything. The breakthrough in Barrett's case came 3 weeks after Sarah had agreed to help with the investigation. She arrived at work on a Tuesday morning to find a package waiting on her desk, addressed to her personally with no return address. The FBI surveillance team immediately evacuated the building and called in the bomb squad. But this package didn't contain explosives. Inside, wrapped in careful layers of tissue paper, was an antique pocket watch with an elegant silver case. Attached to it was a handwritten note in the same cramped writing Agent Vasquez had shown her from Barrett's notebook. Ms. Martinez, this watch belonged to my grandfather, who served in World War II as a demolitions expert. He taught me that explosives are an art form, requiring precision, creativity, and respect for the craft. Your amateur fumbling with my device at the library was an insult to every professional who has ever worked with explosive ordnance. I am giving you an opportunity to redeem yourself and prove that your success was not merely luck. Tomorrow evening at 8 p.m., go to the Arizona Science Center downtown. In the planetarium, you will find my masterpiece, a device that cannot be defeated by good intentions and library manuals. You will have exactly 30 minutes to prove that you deserve the reputation your little stunt has earned you. If you succeed, I will disappear and never trouble you again. If you fail, you and everyone in the building will die, and the world will see that amateur heroism is no match for professional expertise. Come alone, or the device will detonate immediately. Tell the FBI, and it will detonate immediately. This is between you and me, a test of skill and nerve. Don't disappoint me. Tia Barrett. Agent Vasquez read the note 3 times before speaking. This is exactly what our psychological profile predicted. Barrett's narcissism won't allow him to accept that a civilian defeated his device. He needs to restore his sense of superiority. But if I go alone, he'll kill me whether I succeed or not, Sarah pointed out. And if I don't go, he'll kill everyone at the science center. You're not going alone, Vasquez said firmly. We'll have agents positioned throughout the building, monitoring every entrance and exit. Barrett won't be able to escape, and we won't let him hurt you. Sarah studied the antique pocket watch, its silver surface reflecting the conference room's fluorescent lights. What if he's telling the truth about the device detonating if I don't come alone? What if he has ways to detect FBI surveillance? Then, we adapt our approach. But, Ms. Martinez, you need to understand, this man is not going to honor any agreement he makes with you. If you somehow manage to defuse his device, he'll try to kill you anyway. His ego can't tolerate being beaten by someone he considers an amateur. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment trying to prepare mentally for what might be her final confrontation with Thomas Barrett. She called Marcus, her brother, without telling him about the specific threat she was facing. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I know all this attention has been overwhelming. Marcus, when you were in Afghanistan, defusing bombs every day, how did you deal with the fear?" Her brother was quiet for a moment. "I focused on the mission, Sarah. Every bomb I defused meant that someone's child would come home safely, that a school could open the next morning, that a marketplace could operate without fear. The fear never went away, but it became secondary to the purpose. Did you ever think about the bombers? The people who planted the devices? Sometimes. Most of them were just trying to survive, following orders or responding to circumstances they couldn't control. But a few were true believers who enjoyed causing suffering. Those were the dangerous ones, because they would never stop unless they were stopped." Sarah understood. Thomas Barrett was a true believer, convinced that his expertise gave him the right to kill innocent people to prove his superiority. He would never stop unless he was stopped, permanently. The next evening, as Sarah prepared to walk into what might be a trap at the Arizona Science Center, she thought about all the children who would visit the planetarium that week, all the families who came to learn about stars and space exploration. She thought about Barrett's previous victims, 16 people who had died because a bitter man with military training had decided that public spaces should be battlegrounds. She checked her small toolkit one more time, making sure she had everything she might need to defuse another sophisticated explosive device. Then, she looked at herself in the mirror, still the same gentle-faced woman who had read stories to kindergartners and helped teenagers with their homework, but now carrying knowledge and skills that most people would never need. Sarah Martinez, the librarian who had accidentally become a guardian, was ready for her final examination. The Arizona Science Center at 8 p.m. was eerily quiet, its usually bustling halls empty except for security guards who had been discreetly replaced with FBI agents. Sarah walked through the main entrance carrying only her small toolkit and her phone, which was equipped with a tracking device and emergency beacon that Agent Vasquez had insisted upon. Despite Barrett's warning about coming alone, Sarah knew that federal agents were positioned throughout the building. Hidden cameras monitored every corridor, and specialized detection equipment scanned for explosive materials and electronic devices. If Barrett tried to escape after the confrontation, he would find every exit blocked. But, as Sarah made her way through the darkened exhibits toward the planetarium, she felt utterly alone. Barrett had proven himself capable of sophisticated electronic surveillance and anti-tampering mechanisms. If he detected the FBI presence, he might detonate his device immediately, killing everyone in the building along with the agents trying to protect her. The planetarium was located on the third floor of the Science Center, a large dome chamber where visitors normally watched educational programs about astronomy and space exploration. During the day, it was filled with excited children and curious adults learning about distant galaxies and the mechanics of planetary motion. Now, as Sarah climbed the stairs toward her confrontation with Barrett, it felt like ascending toward her own execution. She found the door to the planetarium unlocked. Inside, the dome-shaped ceiling was dark except for a few small LED lights that provided minimal illumination. In the center of the room, where the projection equipment was normally located, Sarah could see a complex electronic device that was much larger and more sophisticated than the bomb she had defused at the library. This device was clearly Barrett's masterpiece. Multiple timer displays showed different countdown sequences, suggesting several independent trigger mechanisms. Banks of LED lights blinked in complex patterns, and she could hear the electronic humming of numerous active components. Thick bundles of wires connected various modules, creating a maze of circuits that would take hours to fully understand. Barrett had not tried to hide the device or make it difficult to locate. Instead, he had displayed it prominently, like a work of art that he wanted her to appreciate before she attempted to defeat it. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice came from the shadows near the planetarium's projection booth. Thomas Barrett stepped into the dim light, and Sarah got her first direct look at the man who had been planning her death. He was smaller than she had expected from the FBI photographs, probably no taller than 5'8", with thinning brown hair and the pale complexion of someone who spent most of his time indoors. But his eyes held the cold intelligence she had seen in the pictures, along with something else, a feverish intensity that suggested someone who had passed beyond normal human concerns. Barrett wore a simple gray jumpsuit with multiple pockets containing electronic tools and testing equipment. He moved with the careful precision of someone accustomed to working with deadly materials, never making unnecessary gestures or wasting motion. "Ms. Martinez," he continued, his voice conversational despite the circumstances. "I'm disappointed that you brought federal agents with you, but I expected as much." "It doesn't matter. This device is designed to kill everyone in the building regardless of how many law enforcement officers surround us." Sarah studied the bomb without approaching it. From 20 feet away, she could see that it incorporated elements she recognized from her training with Marcus, along with components that were completely unfamiliar. Barrett had clearly invested significant time and money in creating something that would challenge even professional bomb disposal experts. "You said you wanted to test my skills," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. "What are the rules?" Barrett smiled, and Sarah noticed that several of his teeth were missing. 30 minutes, as promised. Multiple redundant trigger systems, each capable of independent detonation. Electronic countermeasures designed to defeat standard bomb squad equipment. And, one special feature, if you succeed in disabling the primary mechanism, a backup system will activate that can only be stopped by solving a mathematical equation that I have programmed into the device. He gestured toward the complex array of displays and circuits. "This bomb represents 15 years of professional experience in explosive ordnance disposal, combined with advanced knowledge of electronics, computer programming, and chemical engineering. It is designed to be impossible for an amateur to defuse, no matter how lucky they might have been with a simpler device." Sarah walked slowly around the perimeter of the bomb, observing it from different angles. Barrett made no move to stop her, clearly confident that observation alone wouldn't be sufficient to understand his creation. The device was indeed sophisticated. She could see at least 4 different timer mechanisms, multiple motion sensors, several components that appeared to be pressure-sensitive triggers, and what looked like a radio receiver that might detonate the bomb if it received a specific signal. The electronic displays showed various countdowns, but they weren't synchronized. Some showed 28 minutes remaining, others showed different numbers entirely. "The beauty of this design," Barrett explained, apparently enjoying the opportunity to describe his work, "is that there is no single solution. Every action you take to disable one component will affect the others in unpredictable ways. It's like playing 3-dimensional chess while blindfolded, except that making the wrong move kills everyone in a half-mile radius." Sarah took out her phone and appeared to check the time, but actually activated the emergency signal that would alert Agent Vasquez to begin evacuation procedures for the surrounding area. She couldn't prevent Barrett from detonating his device if she failed to disarm it, but she could minimize the number of people who would be killed. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, continuing to circle the bomb. "What do you hope to accomplish?" Barrett's expression darkened. "Society has become soft, Ms. Martinez. People assume they're safe in schools and libraries and shopping centers. They've forgotten that safety requires constant vigilance and professional expertise. My attacks remind them that security is not a given, it must be earned through strength and preparation." "And the people you've killed? The children and families? Casualties in a necessary war. Every society must periodically be reminded of its vulnerability, or it becomes complacent and weak. The Romans understood this. So did the Spartans. Sarah realized that Barrett was not just a terrorist, he was completely detached from normal human empathy. In his mind, the 16 people he had already killed were abstract casualties in some philosophical conflict, not real human beings with families and dreams and futures. That understanding helped her focus. Barrett was not someone who could be reasoned with or appealed to. He was a predator who would continue killing until he was stopped permanently. Her job was to defuse his bomb and survive long enough for the FBI to arrest him. She opened her toolkit and approached the device carefully. Barrett made no move to interfere, but she noticed that he had taken a position near what appeared to be a remote detonator. If she triggered any of the anti-tampering mechanisms, he could explode the bomb manually before she had a chance to complete her work. 26 minutes remaining, Barrett announced helpfully. I should mention that the mathematical equation I referenced earlier requires knowledge of advanced calculus and differential equations. I assume your informal training with your brother didn't cover those subjects? Sarah ignored the taunt and focused on the device's construction. Unlike the relatively simple bomb at the library, this one incorporated multiple layers of complexity. The primary timer system appeared to be connected to the main explosive charge, but there were also secondary and tertiary systems that could trigger detonation independently. The first challenge was understanding which components were real and which might be decoys designed to waste her time. Barrett was smart enough to include fake elements that would draw her attention away from the actual trigger mechanisms. Working methodically, Sarah used her multimeter to trace power flows through the various circuits. She quickly identified 3 genuine timer systems and 2 that appeared to be non-functional decoys. The motion sensors were real, but they seemed to be calibrated to detect only large movements. She could work on the device without triggering them as long as she was careful. The radio receiver was more concerning. If Barrett decided to detonate the bomb remotely, there was nothing she could do to stop him. But she noticed that the receiver was connected to the device through a single antenna wire that was partially accessible. If she could disable that connection without Barrett noticing. 18 minutes remaining, Barrett called out. I'm impressed that you haven't triggered any of the automatic systems yet. Perhaps your success at the library wasn't entirely due to luck. Sarah continued working, using her wire strippers to carefully expose small sections of various circuits. The device was indeed more complex than anything Marcus had taught her about, but the basic principles were the same. Every bomb, no matter how sophisticated, required a power source, a trigger mechanism, and an explosive charge. Disrupt any of those elements, and the device became harmless. The challenge was doing so without activating the multiple backup systems that Barrett had incorporated. You know, Barrett continued conversationally, I researched you extensively after your little performance at the library. Quiet librarian, never married, lives alone, spends her free time reading and gardening. I wondered how someone so ordinary could interfere with my work. Sarah found the main power distribution hub and began tracing connections to the various subsystems. If she could understand how Barrett had designed the power flows, she might be able to create a cascade failure that would shut down all the timer mechanisms simultaneously. But then, I learned about your brother's military service and your informal training. That explained your basic knowledge, but not your nerve under pressure. Most people would have run screaming when they discovered an explosive device. What made you stay and try to defuse it? For the first time since entering the planetarium, Sarah looked directly at Barrett. The same thing that made you plant it. We both believe strongly in what we're doing. Barrett nodded approvingly. Exactly. We're not so different, Ms. Martinez. We both understand that sometimes extraordinary measures are necessary to achieve important goals. The difference is that my goals serve a larger purpose, while yours are merely sentimental. Sarah returned her attention to the device. She had located the central processing unit that coordinated the various timer systems, but accessing it required removing a protective housing that might trigger additional anti-tampering mechanisms. 14 minutes remaining. You're moving too slowly, Ms. Martinez. At this rate, you'll still be studying my creation when it explodes. But Sarah had learned something important from her examination of the device. Barrett's sophistication was also his weakness. He had created so many interconnected systems that the bomb required constant electronic coordination between components. If she could disrupt that coordination without triggering the individual anti-tampering mechanisms. She located the central data bus, a thick cable that carried synchronization signals between all the major components. It was heavily shielded and appeared to be protected by multiple sensors, but Sarah noticed that the shielding had a small manufacturing defect near one of the connection points. Using the smallest tool in her kit, she carefully probed the defect. If she could create a short circuit in the data bus without Barrett noticing, it might cause all the timer systems to lose synchronization and shut down safely. 10 minutes remaining. I have to admit, Ms. Martinez, you've lasted longer than I expected. Most amateurs would have triggered the anti-tampering mechanisms by now. Sarah worked with surgical precision, using her fingernails to gradually widen the small defect in the cable shielding. It was delicate work that required absolute steadiness, but she had learned to control her breathing and heart rate during the stressful hours she had spent training with Marcus. Of course, Barrett continued, even if you somehow manage to disable the timer systems, you still have to solve the mathematical equation I mentioned. Are you familiar with partial differential equations, Ms. Martinez? Fourier transforms? Complex analysis? Sarah smiled slightly. Barrett didn't know about her educational background before becoming a librarian. She had actually studied engineering in college before switching to library science, and she had taken advanced mathematics courses that covered exactly the topics he was referencing. But she didn't need to solve his equation. With 5 minutes remaining on the primary timer, Sarah completed her work on the central data bus. The short circuit she had created was invisible from Barrett's position, but it was already disrupting the synchronization signals that kept the various timer systems coordinated. One by one, the electronic displays began flickering and showing error messages. The complex pattern of LED lights became chaotic, then gradually faded to darkness. The electronic humming that had filled the planetarium began to diminish. What did you do? Barrett demanded, moving closer to examine his device. I broke your masterpiece, Sarah said calmly. All the sophistication you built into it became a liability when the central control system failed. Your bomb just became a pile of expensive electronic components. Barrett's face contorted with rage as he realized that his device had been defeated by the same amateur who had humiliated him at the library. He reached for the remote detonator, intending to trigger manual explosion. But Sarah had anticipated this reaction. While Barrett had been watching her work on the main device, she had also disabled the antenna connection for the radio receiver. The remote detonator was no longer connected to anything. Barrett pressed the button repeatedly, his face growing red with frustration as nothing happened. The bomb that was supposed to restore his reputation had been defeated by the same quiet librarian who had interfered with his previous attack. FBI. Nobody move. Agent Vasquez burst through the planetarium doors with a tactical team, their weapons trained on Barrett. He was so focused on his non-functional detonator that he didn't resist when they tackled him and applied handcuffs. As Barrett was led away, still muttering about amateur interference and professional expertise, Agent Vasquez approached Sarah with a mixture of relief and admiration. Outstanding work, Ms. Martinez. Our monitoring equipment confirmed that you disabled the device with more than 2 minutes to spare. Sarah looked down at the complex bomb that had been designed specifically to kill her. Even disabled, it was an impressive piece of engineering, representing months of planning and thousands of dollars in specialized components. Barrett had been intelligent, methodical, and completely ruthless. But he had also been wrong about one fundamental thing. Sarah's success wasn't due to luck or amateur enthusiasm. It was due to careful preparation, clear thinking under pressure, and an absolute commitment to protecting innocent people regardless of personal risk. Agent Vasquez, Sarah said, Lieutenant Morrison mentioned that Phoenix PD is looking for qualified bomb disposal technicians. Is that offer still open? 6 months later, Sarah Martinez graduated from the FBI's Hazardous Device School in Alabama with honors, specializing in improvised explosive devices and electronic countermeasures. She returned to Phoenix as a certified bomb disposal expert with the police department, but she also continued working part-time at the library. On Wednesday afternoons, she still read stories to children in the same reading corner where she had once discovered a sophisticated explosive device. The children knew her as Miss Sarah, the friendly librarian who wore protective gear sometimes but always had time to help them find their favorite books. What they didn't know was that Miss Sarah also responded to emergency calls throughout Arizona and neighboring states, using her unique combination of technical expertise and unshakable calm to defuse bombs planted by people like Thomas Barrett. Sarah had found her true calling in the most unexpected way. She was no longer the innocent-looking librarian who read quietly and went unnoticed. She was a guardian who stood between dangerous people and their intended victims, someone who could face down the worst of human nature with steady hands and clear thinking. Thomas Barrett was serving multiple life sentences in federal prison, but there were others like him, people who used their technical skills to hurt innocent civilians. Sarah Martinez was ready for all of them. In her small toolkit, next to the wire strippers and multimeter that had saved so many lives, she now carried Barrett's antique pocket watch. She kept it not as a trophy, but as a reminder that expertise without compassion was just another form of destruction. Every time she successfully defused a device that could have killed families and children, Sarah thought about her brother Marcus and the lessons he had taught her in their garage. She thought about the responsibility that came with specialized knowledge, and the courage required to use that knowledge to protect people who might never know their names. She looked innocent, and in many ways she still was. But Sarah Martinez had learned that innocence didn't mean helplessness, and gentleness didn't mean weakness. When evil people with dangerous skills threatened her community, the quiet librarian who loved children's stories and organized book drives was ready to face them down with everything she had learned about courage, precision, and the absolute necessity of standing up for people who couldn't protect themselves. The bombs got more sophisticated, but so did she. And Sarah Martinez never backed down.